Well, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Emma Raducanu, a British woman, winning the women's singles, only 18 years old as a qualifier at the US Open, a British singles champion of a slam. I think both of us would probably say it's a long time until we'd be saying that again. But Emma Raducanu against all odds. What a great tournament it's been all round. We're gonna discuss more of it. We're gonna discuss the men's single as well, obviously, where Daniil Medvedev stops Novak Djokovic, great in history, and finally picking up that first slam title for himself. A brilliant tournament all round. As always, we are Down the Tee Tennis Podcast. And Ewan, just start, how much did you enjoy that US Open?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. As you say, it really was an amazing tournament, and I think we've seen many people say it, but I would absolutely agree. It's one of the best Grand Slam tournaments I could remember watching sort of fully since I've really followed tennis followed it for probably around 10 years, and maybe not followed every slam in that time, but particularly the one in recent years. I mean, there's nothing I can think of that quite lives up to this one in terms of the stories we had, which will come on you, the number of amazing matches we had on in both the men's and women's draw. Just there's just so much to enjoy, and fantastic to see the fans back after no fans last year. I think probably some of the greatest atmospheres we've seen in tennis. So I mean, really just an amazing tournament.
Yeah, I think we all kind of enjoyed the US Open last year just because we'd gone so long without professional tennis, without Grand Slam tennis, and then we had a few weeks leading up to the US Open and then the US Open, and it was great to have it back. But when you compare this tournament to last tournament, just the fact that there's fans in those stands and making noise, I'm not always the biggest supporter of the US Open crowd, but they are. I mean, they are brilliant. I do think that there is some behaviours you don't see at other slams, but for the most part, just to have incredible atmospheres inside tennis stadiums, it's completely different, and it adds so much to the game. But like you said, there were so many incredible stories. In a US Open where on the men's side we were without Rafa Nadal, without Roger Federer, I mean Dominic Thiem as well. I don't know. I don't know if it almost felt like a foregone conclusion to you. I think Wimbledon very much felt like a foregone conclusion. We had so many great matches along the way, and it was Djokovic in the final. But what was there any sort of hint to you that it wasn't kind of that foregone conclusion of just Djokovic picking up another slam?
Well, yeah, I would definitely say it wasn't as much of a foregone conclusion as it seemed at Wimbledon, just given Djokovic's dominance at that tournament, particularly in recent years. He's, I think, just the way he separates himself from the competition recently on grass. I think it is a different story in hard courts, but also you could say different to the US Open as it is at the Australian Open, which has been his most dominant slam in hard courts, where he's obviously never lost a final, won 9 titles there, but 3 at the US Open, and he has had some, obviously 3 titles. It's not a bad record by any means, but by his standards, probably as the greatest hardcore player ever. He has had some disappointments at the US Open. Now, obviously, this being the 6th final that he lost, and what he was going for in the calendar Grand Slam. For me, I felt convinced he would go far in the tournament and make at least the semi-finals, if not the final, but I wasn't convinced that he would win it, given he was waiting for him at the end of the tournament in Zverev and Medvedev, and just the pressure that was going to build throughout the tournament as he tried to achieve history.
Yeah, and I think we'll start with the finals actually, this weekend's finals, since we're here, and we'll start with the men since we're already discussing Djokovic. That final between Daniil Medvedev and Novak Djokovic. Firstly, sort of Medvedev picking up his first slam. How important do you feel that is for him and also the game, and maybe the next gen and the beliefs of the next gen as a whole? And just what are your thoughts on the final in general?
Yeah, well, I think it's a hugely significant win for Medvedev. Obviously, we hadn't seen, if we're going to call him kind of the oldest player of that next gen, as it's been termed at 25, we hadn't seen a guy in that group break through yet and win a slam. And also, none of those guys had actually beaten Novak Djokovic in a slam. I think Nadal had only lost once to those guys in a slam, which was to Tsitsipas at the Australian Open this year. So we really hadn't seen a moment like this where, okay, as we said, Federer, I think, had only lost one as well, but particularly in recent years, given Federer's age, it's been Nadal and Djokovic who'd still been dominant at the Grand Slams. We just hadn't seen a Medvedev, Zverev, or Tsitsipas actually beat one of these guys and obviously go on to win the title. We've seen Dominic Thiem, who's obviously a couple of years older, win the US Open last year, and as we talked about, it was a fantastic achievement. Irrespective of who you beat together, obviously he did beat Medvedev in the semis and Zverev in the final, so he took out a couple of his younger rivals, but didn't beat Nadal and Djokovic. Obviously not his fault. Djokovic was the only one who was there. Obviously, you know what happened with him there. But so this is a huge moment for one of these young guys to finally not only win a slam, but go through the player who has been the dominant player of the last decade. And the final in general, I thought it was, well, a big surprise the way it played out. I wasn't shocked that Medvedev won. I mean, I did predict Djokovic to win before the tournament, but for me, that was the least likely of all the scenarios. If you're going to say one of the players and in how many sets, I would have said Medvedev in straight sets and a pretty convincing straight sets would have been the least likely to me. Like I say, I think he could have won it. I thought he could win it, but I really didn't quite envisage that. It was a staggering performance from him, I thought. And clearly Djokovic wasn't quite his best. I think in these scenarios, it's hard to know which side to give more weight to, how much credit you give to Medvedev, his fantastic performance, how much you put it down to Djokovic not being his best. I think you've got to give a bit more for me to Medvedev, because I don't think he really could have played any better. I think clearly the pressure did get to Djokovic, and it's understandable given what he was going for. There might have been a physical element there as well. With obviously, I think he spent about 5.5 hours more on court heading into the final. Through the tournament, he did have a tougher draw, and obviously that's just the way it plays out. Medvedev, we're not saying he had an easy draw, but he did have a kind draw, but he was pretty ruthless in the way he dealt with it still, and he dropping one set en route to the final and still dealing with a great player in Auger-Aliassime in straight sets in the semis. Djokovic, it was tough having to go through Zverev and Medvedev. I think that was a factor, but probably just the biggest factor for me was the pressure of the calendar Grand Slam.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I very much agree with you. It's important to give Medvedev most of the credit. He's come through a fairly tough draw, like you said, taking out players like Felix Auger-Aliassime, not an easy feat along the way, and then faced Novak Djokovic, probably definitely the biggest challenge in men's professional right now, facing Novak Djokovic at a Grand Slam, and he's won convincingly, and you have to give Medvedev a lot of credit for that. But I do think this doesn't diminish his achievement, but I think Djokovic was below his standard. Like you say, it may have been sort of the pressure of the calendar year Grand Slam on his shoulders. It also may have been a physical thing. It did have this tendency to lose his first set all throughout the tournament, didn't he? But I think, as you say, Medvedev couldn't have played much better. His quality from the back of the court, unbelievable. His defence when Djokovic tried to step up the power, and Djokovic was doing that quite a lot. I think maybe because he was struggling a little bit, he was trying to take the initiative and kill points. But Medvedev, not only defending, but turning defence into attack, hitting an awkward ball back, with using the power in Djokovic's ball, and also generating some magnificent power himself as well when Djokovic is feeding him a slower ball. From the back of the court, I thought it was incredible. I wouldn't say it was a perfect match from Medvedev. I'd say that drop shot that he tried a few times was almost an indicator of Djokovic's level in the final, because it was a high bouncing drop shot. It was going quite deep. It was so easy to get to, and Djokovic was always getting to it. But he sprayed a couple out. He's put a couple into the net, and Djokovic, they're usually easy putaways. He doesn't make mistakes on that kind of balls, and I do think that was an indicator of Djokovic's level. But I think maybe even if Djokovic was at a higher level, towards his best level, just Medvedev's quality from the back of the court, it'd have been in for a tough match anyway. But that is the second Djokovic-Medvedev Slam final we've had this year. I've mentioned this, I've tweeted it, but for such an incredible matchup, as they are as players, and we have seen really good matches between them in best of three, the finals haven't quite lived up to the billing, have they?
No, it has been a bit of a shame that it's worked out that way in those two finals. I mean, this one, as you say, it was pretty much a complete reversal of the Australian Open final, which Djokovic won convincingly in straight sets. And yeah, I think it is a shame we haven't had that epic match where they've both been at their very best at the same time in one of these finals. As we say, we've seen some great matches for them outside of the slams. In Cincinnati a few years ago was probably the best one between the two. I think in the semi-finals where Medvedev won in 3 sets, that was a great match, and I think it is a good matchup. I mean, obviously there's a lot of similarities between them. I think it can work out that way, where if they're both not at their very best, if one of them is just better on the day, it can be a convincing win. We've seen that a couple of times. But I would agree with a lot of what you said about Medvedev. I mean, and yeah, I'll just say the serve as well. He served unbelievably. Didn't really give. Maybe you could say it wasn't Djokovic's best returning day, but I think the way he spots, and it was going huge on the second serve as well. I mean, it's very difficult even for Novak to do much about that. And you're right about the drop shot. I mean, there weren't always great drop shots, but it's just a surprise to see Djokovic miss so many of those short balls. When he was getting there, the movement seemed to be kind of okay up to them. Maybe you could say he was half a step slower in getting there, but yeah, it paid off, and he did hold off that mini comeback in the end. We saw in the third set, which he did wonder. Djokovic got that, saved the match point, got the first break back, and you wondered if he was going to get the second break, what would have happened there? Could be, but I still think Medvedev probably would have won. You can never write Djokovic off there, but I felt like after Medvedev won the second set, it was really crucial, given how Djokovic was struggling either mentally and physically, perhaps. The early part of the second set was the key, I think, where Medvedev saved those break points in 2 successive games. I think the 5 break points across the 2 games, especially the love 40, where Djokovic had a couple of the points on his racket and made some pretty uncharacteristic errors. The next game, there was obviously that, I think there was that let on the second serve break point, which was an unfortunate one. I've seen a lot of people saying that was a turning point, but then there was also the next break point. Medvedev hit an unbelievable backhand down the line to save it. So I think he was unbelievable in the important moments, and for once Djokovic wasn't.
Yeah, and I think just one more thing I'm wanting to pick up on in this final before we go on and discuss the women's and you know, Britain's favourite tennis player, Britain's favourite sports star right now in the Raducanu. But before that, I just want to touch on one more thing. We finally got to see the crowd embrace Novak Djokovic. It clearly meant quite a lot to him. I do think they maybe stepped over the mark with the cheering in between first and second serve, and I think that first championship point where they were shouting all the way through it for Medvedev. That I don't like to see that. I do like the atmosphere at the US Open. You know, it's almost like a team sport match, a football, you know, American football match kind of atmosphere. And I do think it's good to see in tennis, but also in tennis, you do need the quiet during the point with this incredible atmosphere in between. It's excellent to see. I do think that was a bit disappointing, but just to see the US Open crowd, and it is usually quite an anti-Djokovic crowd, finally embrace him for the brilliant champion that he is. You know, how good was that to see for you?
It was great to see, yeah, because as you say, he's been on the receiving end of that in on multiple occasions in the past. I think particularly the one which comes to mind is the 2015 final against Federer, where I think that was probably one of the most pro Federer and Djokovic crowds you could see. I think more so than the 2019 Wimbledon final, as you say. I think maybe the crowd at times can step off the mark, as you mentioned, with Medvedev serving after the match. I think that contributed a bit to losing serve there, and I think a double fault as well, and a couple of double faults in those games. I think at times maybe it is a little bit over the mark, but I mean, it was great to see Djokovic kind of getting the appreciation he does deserve. I mean, for what he was going for. It was a shame in a way that it's come in a match where he wasn't able to win it. He wasn't able to kind of give them that victory for them to see history. But I think he said afterwards, even though he fell short, it was amazing just to experience that. Which he does deserve definitely. And even though he couldn't quite pull off the calendar slam, I think to win 3 and get to the final of the US Open, I mean, it's still an amazing achievement at the age of 34. No one had come that close, or even close to that close since Rod Laver did it in 1969 in the men's game. So I think the fact he's done it at this age, when for me his best years were probably 2011, 2015. I think we've seen how many close matches he's won along the way to get this year. It was a testament to his mental toughness, more his level of tennis this year. I think if he had pulled it off, not being perhaps in the best period of his career, it would have been even all the more remarkable. But I mean, 3 Grand Slams in a final in a season, it's still an amazing year.
I'll just add my final thoughts on that, picking up on what you said. I do think it is one of the best individual years in men's professional tennis of all time, probably, and definitely that we've seen recently. And the fact that he fell short of the Golden Slam, which we knew he was going for, and then the calendar year slam. It's easy. It's recency bias, isn't it? It's easy to say, oh, he fell short, but it's been one of the most insane winning runs in slam matches that we've seen. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for his achievements, and it should be recognised as one of the best years of men's professional tennis that we've seen from a player of all time. And just one more thing, I think it's testament to what sets Medvedev apart from other players around his age group, but the crowd thing was clearly getting to him, and it did get to him, and he hit a couple of double faults, but he still managed to drag himself over the line, even though it was getting to him. But we'll draw a line under the men's final for now. We'll come back to talk about more of the tournament as a whole after we discuss the women's final. Emma Raducanu, a British Grand Slam champion, just 18 years old, first player, men's or singles in the Open era, men's or women's in the Open era to win the singles from qualifying. I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it, Ewan? It's hard to put into words.
It is still hard to put into words. A couple of days later, I'm still really in disbelief at what happened and what Emma Raducanu achieved. I mean, just as you say, all the stats you read off there, I mean, they are just unbelievable. You'd think it's right up there with the sporting fairy tales. You'd see just unlikely, incredible victories. Like Leicester City winning the Premier League. It is that incredible, and it's right up there, I think, as a sporting achievement. I mean, only a second Grand Slam main draw tournament. It's a first WTA title at any level, and 20-0 record in sets through the qualifying and the main draw. Didn't lose more than 4 games in a set in the main draw. I mean, it really is just it's hard to comprehend. I mean, what she achieved, the level of tennis she produced, and the way she seemingly just was unaffected by pressure. I mean, ranked 150 in the world going into the tournament. I mean, and we did see it, fantastic level from her at Wimbledon. Some, an amazing breakthrough there as a wild card, getting to the 4th round. Obviously, it ended unfortunately, but I think I expected her to back it up. I mean, I didn't think that was a one-off by any means. When the level she produced, the composure and the mental strength she seems to have, I thought we'd definitely see more of her. But I didn't see her as a contender for a Grand Slam this quickly, and to go through a tournament without losing a set, beating some of the players she did, it is just staggering. And to beat Leylah Fernandez in the final, obviously another player who was also 18 up until a few days ago, just turned 19. I mean, I think they both handled the occasion extremely well, but Raducanu, just the complete player. I mean, the complete game she has, a strong serve. I mean, it's the ground strokes which really stand out. I mean, particularly the backhand. But I mean, just how aggressive she can be, but with safety, without looking like she's really gonna miss for the most part. And also the defense, the shots she can hit from down low, kind of crashing down, the strength in her legs there, the movement, and also we've seen her come to the net and have a lot of success. So I mean, really just looking like there's no weakness there. As we mentioned, the composure is possibly the most impressive part of it all. But really, it's as you said at the start, I think I did not see a British Grand Slam champion coming around this soon. So it's amazing.
Yeah, and I always like to show off this. I've got to say, I watched Emma Raducanu at an ITF final in Sunderland in March. I think it just crossed over into March 2020, right before the pandemic. So I was an Emma Raducanu fan before everyone. I'm saying that. We'll accept a few people. She was quite well known as a top talent from quite a young age, I think. But I think so much of what was impressive about her game back then, what struck me even back then, was the consistency of depth that she can hit from the back of the court. Really, she put her opponent in that match, who was ranked a couple of hundred places higher than her. She was the number 1 seed in that tournament, Victoria Tomova, a Bulgarian player. And she put her under so much pressure. Raducanu won the first set of that final. But I think the extra experience of Tomova showed, and she managed to fight back. Raducanu actually had a bad record in finals at sort of I mean, she lost her WTA 125 final quite recently. I think she reached ITF finals relatively often, but actually lost them. But seemingly in the pressure of a Grand Slam final, the biggest final she was ever in, there was absolutely no effect on her, no hangover of those ITF tournaments or that WTA 125. Just it's incredible, sort of her resilience and the way she's responded to the criticism that she draws from certain sections after Wimbledon, isn't it?
Oh, it is absolutely, and I think it's, yeah, as you say, it's answered any questions which were wrongly raised really over what happened at Wimbledon, which was a fantastic result just in what she achieved. Yeah, unfortunately, the way it ended, but I don't think that should have been any knock on a character. And I think we've seen what a champion she is. But as you mentioned, resilience is definitely the right word of what we've seen from her in this tournament. But yeah, just to not even. Still can't get over the not dropping a set. I mean, it really is just incredible. I mean, just some of the wins she had, but particularly for me against Sakkari in the semi-finals was maybe the most impressive, because I really thought that was the first one. I thought, well, this really could be a tough match. I'll be surprised if this one's going to be straight sets. I thought, she could lose this. Sakkari's playing amazingly well. It'd been Pliskova. I mean, to win that one for the loss of only 5 games, and I mean, it could have been more convincing in the second set with the break points she had there. I mean, that was remarkable. And then to handle it in the final, like say against Fernandez, who she had played in the junior Wimbledon, I think three years ago and won. So I mean, I think we've just seen 2 stars really emerge there. As you mentioned, both were known as fantastic talents, but I did not see either of them, reaching a Grand Slam final this soon. So for Raducanu, it is just remarkable, and hopefully the start of a fantastic career. I would be surprised if it's not the first of many.
Yeah, and you've mentioned 2 fantastic young stars in the final there. I'm yet to say anything on Leylah Fernandez here. I think just looking at her draw, the draw she came through, her run, extremely tough. She took out Osaka, she took out Sabalenka, she took out, who else am I missing?
Kerber and Svitolina.
Kerber and Svitolina as well, yeah. An insane draw. I think I watched a few of those matches. I watched the Svitolina match, but there was a moment where it looked like Alina was coming back into it, and she managed to overcome it, turn the tide back round. So just another absolutely stunning player. And Fernandez's draw was significantly tougher than Raducanu's. We can say that, but Raducanu's draw wasn't easy either. As you've mentioned, coming through Sakkari, I thought that's where the straight set run would end there. I thought she could compete against Sakkari and she might win, but I didn't think it'd be straight sets. Belinda Bencic as well, just fresh off an Olympic gold and was playing good tennis in the tournament. And then even looking at Shelby Rogers, who'd just beaten Ash Barty and ranked around 40 in the world herself. Yes, she was unseeded, but a very good player. Sara Sorribes-Tormo was in there around 40 in the world as well, isn't she? So some tough players in there, not quite as tough as Fernandez's draw, but as you've mentioned, 2 young stars. We've seen players emerging with WTA before. I mean, Andreescu hasn't gone away. She's had injury issues, but she showed even in this tournament that she's a brilliant player with a lot of talent. She will bounce back. Sophia Kenin, she, following her Australian Open win, she also made the final of RG, but she's had injury issues and she's disappeared a little bit now, but once again, she will be back. I'm thinking Pavlyuchenkova as well. She reached a slam final, and then it was quite a while until we saw her deep in a big tournament again. So we do have this thing with the WTA where players can emerge, but then sort of disappear. It's very well contested. Is the women's the WTA side of tennis? You have players emerging all the time, but you do feel with these 2 in particular that it's not a flash in the pan at all, is it? We'll see a Raducanu Fernandez final in big tournaments, probably in slams again. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll be surprised if we don't see a few more of them, definitely. And I think it's just the age that they are. I mean, absolutely, you give some really good examples there of players, but I think with these 2 just being so young, I think when you make a breakthrough at that young an age, I mean, I just think it's highly unlikely to be flash in the pan, and just given the level that produced, as you mentioned, with Raducanu, the ruthlessness of the scores, and with Fernandez, the quality of opposition she held off. I mean, those 4 top 10 players, I think, in a row, all in 3 sets. I mean, really saw the mental toughness of her, as well as the incredible quality of her game. But I mean, starting with the win against Osaka, where Osaka, I think, served for the match against her in the 3rd round. In the 2nd set, she turned that one around. I mean, that was a huge turning point in the tournament for her there. But then just to back it up in the way she did, and pick off, genuine contenders for the tournament. And Sabalenka in the semi-finals, I mean, was playing unbelievable tennis. I think she steamrolled Krejcikova in the previous round, and I think she'd only dropped 1 set, which was in the opening round. Since then, destroyed a few great players. So I mean, to beat Sabalenka in the semis was unbelievable. So I just think it wasn't like a. I mean, not that if someone gets a run to a slam title, it was lucky, but I don't feel there was any, like, it was unsustainable what they were doing. It was just extremely impressive, the level of tennis and the level of opposition to beat. I'll be surprised if we don't see more from them, definitely.
Yeah, and moving on now from the final contested between 2 young stars, we've seen young stars on both the men and women's side make impressive runs, play impressive matches. Even ones like Holger Rune, was it? Got defeated by Djokovic in the 1st round, but put together a stunning kind of battle against him. Just how fun has it been to see a tournament with these young stars emerging, and just give your thoughts on a few that really impressed you?
Yeah, it really has been great to see them both on both the men's and women's sides. And obviously we've talked about the 2 real standout ones, the women's finalists. But as you mentioned, Rune definitely has coming through as a qualifier. He's only 18 as well, to take a set off of Djokovic and produce a good level before. I think he was kind of struck down with cramps in the latter part of the match, so it could have even been more competitive maybe. So it was, I think he just kind of highlighted himself as someone to watch out for. It had some great success on the Challenger Tour, but definitely the one for me, I mean, who stands out is Carlos Alcaraz. Just see what an incredible talent he is, but I think maybe he's shown himself to be really the most promising young player on the men's side. Just with, not only to start with, I mean, a straight sets win over Cam Norrie, who's been, I think, top 15 in the race to the ATP finals this year. One of the informed players on the tour to beat Norrie, such a great competitor in straight sets, was a pretty stunning 1st round win. Then to back it up and get to the 3rd round, where I thought, okay, you could give Tsitsipas a test, but I mean, to beat Stefanos Tsitsipas, at 18, Tsitsipas, he's been an established top player, number 3 in the world, winner of the ATP finals and the Masters 1000. To beat Tsitsipas in 5 sets, that really was a stunning performance from Alcaraz. And then to back it up with a 5-set win over Peter Gojovcik, who's one of the few qualifiers we saw have a great run. Another theme was qualifiers having great runs here. But yeah, he was 2-1 down in that match. He seemed to be struggling physically, but he found a way to pull it out in the end. Unfortunately, he felt Felix Auger-Aliassiime team in the end, where he had to retire in the 2nd set, who's another player who had a fantastic breakthrough again to his first Grand Slam semi-final. A huge step for him. But Alcaraz, I think, just to already produce the level we've seen from at 18, and I think the fact he can still improve a lot in his game, like the serve can get a lot better, and I think it's already improved, but I think he can hit it pretty big, but he needs to his spots better. That's something he definitely can improve there. I mean, everything else really seems to be there. It's the unbelievable power he can generate from both sides, but also the defense is unbelievable. We've already seen him come to the net and have some success. I mean, just to be already this good at 18, I'm not sure we've seen anyone this good at 18 since maybe Rafa Nadal. And Alcaraz arguably has even more on the offensive side, so it's extremely exciting.
Yeah, I think an important note you made about Alcaraz there is the room for improvement. It's scary, really, because he's already such an excellent player with big weapons, but at 18 years old, there's very clear things, as you mentioned, the serve. I mean, the serve, weirdly, is probably the easiest shot to improve in tennis. It's set up so much for development because you are so in control of it. That's the only shot that you're in complete control of. and there is room for improvement on the serve, and he will probably make that improvement on his serve in his career. And just at 18 years old, you never know whether he's still got some physical development left in him, and that's scary with the power that he can already generate. If he got bigger, if he got stronger, that would just be insane. So, I mean, such an impressive performance already. It was a shame. He'd come through some tough matches, and I don't know if that's what took the toll on his body in the end, but I thought I was so excited by that Felix Alcaraz match up in the semi-final, and it's a shame that in the quarter-final, I should say, and it's a shame that we didn't really get the match that we wanted there. But I think Felix as well, it's important to touch on him. Do you feel like that's been sort of an important slam for him to just go that little bit further than he's gone before?
Definitely. I think it was big for Felix, and we saw him have a couple of really big wins. I think the first one against Roberto Bautista Agut, where he was 2 sets up, and RBA came back, took it to 5 sets, and for him to get over the line there, I mean, I think was really important. So we have seen him lose from 2 sets to love up. I think at the Australian Open this year to Karatsev, and there have been some questions over his mental strength at times, which maybe rightly or wrongly, given how young he is. We've seen him have some, but I think it's mainly to do with his record in finals, having not won one yet. But I think that was a big win for him against such a great competitor and a great player. He really in Bautista, he's not going to give it to you. You've got to finish the guy off. He's not going to allow you to just take that. So you really have to win that, and to back it up against Francis Tiafoe, who was playing great tennis in the 4th round. Who'd taken out Andrei Rublev. That was a big win for Tiafoe. He's had some really solid results, some really good signs from him in recent months. Obviously, he upset Tsitsipas at Wimbledon again, so I think he's climbing the rankings a bit and really outlined himself as someone you don't want to play in the early rounds as one of the top seeds. But for Felix to come through that, and then obviously you got to maybe not luck, but you got through Alcaraz, who had to retire in the quarterfinals. I would have probably backed him to win that anyway. As you say, it was a shame we didn't get to see it. And yeah, a big positive for him to get that semi-final and just have the experience of playing Medvedev, who really is the leader out of those young guys right now. And he was outmatched a bit, but I thought he was pretty good in the first 2 sets. Only it was a bit disappointing when he failed to serve out the second set there. When he had a couple of set points, he kind of collapsed after them, but it was in a way understandable because I think he knew he needed to win the second set. But we've seen Tony Nadal there working with him, who he's obviously been working with, I think, since the start of the clay court season. He's not been at too many tournaments, but he was there, and whether that's translated into his best Grand Slam result so far. So clearly that relationship seems to be a positive thing for him, and it's a big moment for him.
Yeah, and one thing that you touched on was qualifiers as well. Not only a theme in this tournament, but a theme year long. In fact, I probably thought Aslan Karatsev's story at the Australian Open would be the most incredible story in professional tennis this year, and that's out of the window now. And as you've mentioned, Botic van de Zandt on the men's side, the qualifier that went the furthest, reached the quarter-final. He qualified for the Australian Open, where he lost in the first round, having met a young Carlos Alcaraz, also qualifying. He qualified for the French Open. He got a lucky loser spot at Wimbledon, but managed to get through a first round. So he had 2 wins at Slam matches already this year coming into the US Open, but had to go through qualifying again. Do you feel like, we're going to see a bit more of Botic going forward?
I think it's definitely possible because, I mean, just kind of following his results on the Challenger Tour, where it's mainly been where he's been playing. He has been doing a lot of winning. I think you've got to watch out for any player really who's, particularly the guys sort of 25 and under, like he is, or Karatsev was slightly older, but we saw from him just pretty much dominance on the Challenger Tour last year before his breakthrough with Botic. A lot of deep runs, winning some titles, runners up, but just winning matches pretty much everywhere he's been playing. And as you say, qualifying for Grand Slams consistently, not an easy thing to do. And you look at the players he's beaten this draw, Casper Ruud in the second round, who'd been in great form, had been doing a lot of winning himself. And then particularly against Schwartzman in the 4th round was a fantastic win where he won the first 2 sets. He ended up getting taken to 5 sets after having match points and came back and won the 5th 6-1. I mean, that was a huge win against Schwartzman, a guy you'd put in that category, like I mentioned with Bautista Agut. It's not going to be himself. You've really got to produce a high level to finish them off. So that was a brilliant win from him. I thought he actually was pretty impressive against Medvedev in the quarterfinals, where he took a set and could have actually taken the fourth set. You really saw a high level from him, and I think he's definitely a guy who could get in the top 50, if not a little bit higher.
Yeah, and I think that's all the main points covered in the men's draw. So I think it's about time we moved on to talk about more of the women's draw as a whole. For the first 3 rounds, it looks like it was just working out quite standard, wasn't it? And then all of a sudden, some big shocks started happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ash Barty, definitely the biggest shock for me to lose to Shelby Rogers in the third round, who's I think a player she'd already beaten 4 times this year, which I mean is pretty amazing that they've met so many times recently, and she'd won all those matches. Rogers is a player who had a good run at the US Open last year. I think she beat Perra Kvitova there, so she had a big upset, but at this tournament. But to beat Barty, I think who had been obviously not well number 1 and has been the dominant player this year, had won Cincinnati coming in without losing the set. I mean, for me, was the clear favorite to win the title. But she doesn't have a great record at the US Open. I didn't see that being too much of a factor here. I thought it was one of those things which is just a bit of an anomaly. But to lose that match from I think 5-2 in a double breakup in the third set, that was a big shock, definitely. But a huge performance by Rogers, who was then obviously beaten convincingly by Raducanu in the next round. But yeah, Barty definitely a big shock, and Osaka also at least Leylah Fernandez. Maybe not quite as big a shock, given there's some question marks over Osaka, and obviously we've heard afterwards she's going to take some time away. She said she's still struggling with mental health, which is obviously sad to hear. So we hope we're going to see her back, but it might not be until next year. But that was still a big upset. I mean, I still thought Osaka was one of the strong contenders for the title, just given a hard court record of the Grand Slams. So definitely, as you say, it looked like it was progressing as planned, but those two were the big early shocks.
Yeah, and I feel like we've already spoken a bit about Sakkari and Sabalenka. Both players have been known for not really stringing together the long runs at the slams, despite being fantastic players who go far across WTA Tour tournaments. Both of them have made the semi-finals here. Sabalenka had a good run at Wimbledon as well. Sakkari, I believe, had a good run at the French Open. So do you feel like those two have developed hugely in that regard, and that maybe one day they could also add their names to the list of slam winners, considering that progression?
Yeah, well, I think overall it's positive tournaments for those two. I mean, to reach the semi-finals, it's definitely not a bad tournament. I think maybe they might see it as a bit of a missed opportunity to lose to the younger players in Fernandez and Raducanu as well as they were playing. I think they might see it. Yeah, I mean, Sabalenka, especially in that match, she did really kind of, I think, collapse in the final game against Fernandez when she was serving to stay in the match. I think she made 4 unforced errors, I think 2 double faults, and then kind of a wild forehand error on match point. But it has been a bit of a question mark of Sabalenka at slams. Is it a mental thing? I think it kind of is, and it's interesting the debate about who's the best player on the women's side not to win a slam yet, whether it's Pliskova, Svitolina. But for me, it probably is Sabalenka, just game-wise, because I mean, we can see her, and we did see it during this tournament, steamroll players, just the overwhelming power. And I mean, her first serve is pretty much, for me, the best on the WTA tour. The second serve can be a little bit more hit and miss. I think sometimes she can go for a bit too much on it. But yeah, I'll be surprised if she doesn't win a slam. It's still a positive run for her to get to the semi-finals. As we said, she had that long run by not getting past the 4th round of a slam. So she finally did that at Wimbledon. And I mean, back-to-back semi-finals there, it does feel like a matter of time for me that she's going to get over that hurdle and win one. I'll be surprised if she doesn't. And Maria Sakkari, I think it's another great run for her. I mean, she had an amazing win against Bianca Andreescu in the 4th round, which she lost a similar match to Andreescu in Miami earlier in the year. So that was, I think, a big win for her, and backed it up with a great performance against Pliskova. I mean, she was really impressive in that match. Pliskova had been in fantastic form. So for Sakkari, I think maybe she wasn't at her best against Raducanu, but I thought Raducanu really was outstanding in that match. So I think for those two, they've both reached two Grand Slam semi-finals this year. I think that's definitely a big positive for them, given, as you say, we hadn't seen them translate their success elsewhere on the tour to Grand Slams up until this year. So I think definitely we'll see more of those two. And they're both good enough to win a slam for sure.
Yeah. I think just finally on the women's draw, I'd like to give you time to highlight any other players that have maybe impressed you that we haven't touched upon so far, or just any other kind of notes that you've got to pick out from the draw.
Yeah, well, I was impressed by Belinda Bencic, as we mentioned earlier. In the end, she did lose to Raducanu, but I just think it was she hadn't dropped a set up until that point, and she had a fantastic win against Iga Swiatek in the fourth round, which was a match I really enjoyed, which was it was straight sets, but it was an epic first set tie break. She won 14-12 there. I mean, and that was just a really high level match because I thought Iga produced a good level there actually, and she's had a consistent year even without maybe the big results. She's reached, I think she's the only player on the WTA to reach at least the fourth round of all four slams this year. So I think a solid year for Swiatek, which should be noted as positive. But Bencic, definitely, I think since that Olympic gold, she's backed up with a quarterfinal in Cincinnati and another quarterfinal here. I think she's after not a great run of form for her, I think she's kind of reestablished herself as a contender, particularly on hard courts.
Yeah. So moving on from the draws now, I think we'd like to discuss a bit more across the tournament, starting with, I think we've already referenced it quite a lot. So many great battles this tournament, so many great 5-set matches on the men's side, so many matches going the distance, 3 sets on the women's side. Those matches with, you know, the pendulum swings, the close battles, the match points saved. I think I saw someone joke on Twitter that he's called about 5 matches the match of the tournament already, and we were only at the 4th round or something like that. So picking up on that, matches of the tournament, quite a hard one to I think pick out some, but have you got any in mind?
Absolutely. Well, I can't really call it a short list. I mean, because I think I've got about 9 on the men's side and 8 on the women's side. So I mean, first, as you mentioned, so many of them were in the early rounds, which I think is great when you see that really gets the tournament started well and gets the interest early on, when sometimes you might see top players getting through easily in the early rounds. But we saw so many fantastic early matches this tournament. And for me, the big one on the men's women's side, I'll go with Alcaraz against Tsitsipas on the men's in the 3rd round. I just thought, as we touched on before, it really was an incredible battle. But also, I mean, you could look at Tsitsipas against Murray in the 1st round was amazing, which I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the things related to that match. But just the match itself was fantastic. Certainly wasn't sure of drama, but the level of tennis, it was fantastic to see Murray playing that well. I think it was his best performance for me since 2017, probably before the injury and the hip surgery. So I mean, that's a huge positive, I think, for Murray. There's a lot of others you can throw in there, as you mentioned, the save match points. I think there's Seppi against Fucsovics in the 1st round, which 15-13 in the final set tiebreak. There's Maxime Cressy against Carreño Busta. I think he saved 4 match points. I mean, that was a pretty big upset. I think Carreño Busta, someone who had been in great form, was looking likely for a big run here. Also, Tiafoe against Rublev, Sinner against Monfils in 5 sets, and Djokovic against Zverev in the semis. I think you could look at all these as, on the men's side, being fantastic matches. And on the women's, I'll probably go for the best match. I've gone for Pliskova against Amanda Anisimova, which I didn't see all of at the time, but since I've kind of watched extended highlights and almost the full match, that was a fantastic 2nd round contest there. Pliskova saving a match point. I think it was great to see Anisimova playing such a high level again, as we have seen her struggle for a while now. So I think shame she couldn't get over the line for her there, but surely a lot of positives to take from how well she played against the top player. And I mean, I've got about 4 matches here which Leylah Fernandez was involved in, which were all 3 setters against Osaka, Kerber, Svitolina, and Sabalenka all in a row. I mean, I think probably the best one from her I would pick out was the one against Svitolina, which you mentioned earlier in the quarterfinals, final set tiebreak, where she was up at breaks. So for the match, Svitolina came back and looked like she might have won. And in the end, it was just that was a fantastic battle. Also got down Zachary against Andreescu, which I just mentioned before. Simona Halep against Rybakina in the 3rd round was a great match. It was great to see Halep healthy and playing really well again, having a great win there. And Sloane Stephens against Madison Keys in the 1st round was a pretty good one as well. So there's so many fantastic matches there.
Yeah. I think I'm not going to cover any ground that you haven't already covered yet. I might just pick out my favourites from what you've said, because I mean, like I think you've hit the nail on the head really with some of the best matches right there. I was really enjoying that Djokovic Zverev semi-final. The problem was around I'd say probably about midway through the fourth set, just tiredness overcame me, and despite the tennis I was enjoying, I fell asleep, so I had to wake up and watch the rest of the highlights. But I mean, that 53 shot rally in which Zverev saved the first of 2 set points, didn't manage to save the second one, is a highlight from that. Kind of shows what a battle it was. I think Zverev, yeah, he battled hard, but just fell short yet again against a top 10 player in a slam. It's a record that he probably needs to reverse quite sharpish, but one that I'm definitely biased towards, because I mean, I think anyone who's listened to this regularly now knows just how much I love Andy Murray. That match against Tsitsipas, as you've said, probably the most impressive Murray performance for many years now. It's a shame that really it's a first round exit on his record from such, but for the first time in a while we've seen him go toe to toe with a real top class informed player right now, and battle with him, and you know, at times looked like he was set to win that match. But everything that went on in that match, the issue with Murray's shoes, where he was trying to order some new ones because he felt they were slippy, I think that kind of caused him to lose the second set, because not only did it let him affect him on court when he slayed on one of the points, he also let it really get to him mentally, and he just had a bit of a dip, I think. But he came back, won that third set, sadly lost the next 2 sets, got annoyed at Tsitsipas's bathroom break. I mean, the crowd as well was quite electric in that match, so I really did enjoy that match, and I really did enjoy seeing Murray compete against a top player once again. And on the women's side, I'm probably leaning towards Svitolina Fernandez. I think it might be because of it being one of the matches that I watched in full all the way through. Like I've missed so many of the great free setters on the women's side. I've been unlucky and picked out the few matches in there that were quite rough. You know, just sort of 2 sets easily done. Were a lot of the matches that I watched sort of the Bencic-Swiatek match was one that I cleared my day to watch, and then it just kind of fell a bit short of expectations. So yeah, just on account that I watched the full thing all the way through, not highlights, I really did enjoy that Alina Svitolina versus Leylah Fernandez match. But as we've mentioned, my favourite match on the men's side, Murray versus Tsitsipas. The bathroom break issue crops up yet again. We talked a bit about it before the tournament started, after the controversy with Alexander Zverev in Cincinnati, and it continued throughout the tournament as well. He didn't respond really to the criticism that he was drawing. He just kept on doing Stefanos's thing, and kept on taking these breaks when he felt he needed them. So just more on the bathroom breaks. Does something need to be done to change the rule a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, similarly as I think we mentioned last time, I think the important point is it's the rule which is the problem here. I can understand players being criticised, but you know, they're not breaking any rules. They are kind of doing something which is within the rules. But I think, yeah, there does need to be some sort of time limit set on it. I think, you know, what that time limit is. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, whether it should be, you know, 7.5 minutes, 7 minutes, or less. I don't know. Some people would say 5 minutes. I'm not sure. I mean, but yeah, I think there should be some kind of limit. I think when it gets to being 8-9 minutes, it is just a bit too long. And I think, yeah, whatever the limits decide on, I think you could have some sort of system implemented where then every 30 seconds over that that they take, the first one's a warning, the next one is a point penalty or loss of first serve if they're serving, something like that. You could have, so if they want to take more time, they can, if they really need to, but that, you know, they are going to be penalized in some way, say every 30 seconds. So I think something like that could work. It's definitely an option. But yeah, I do understand I think Tsitsipas, he isn't afraid to use a bit of gamesmanship. I don't know if the bathroom break's part of that. I think more just the things you do see him use gamesmanship. I think sometimes where you see him returning. He walks to the baseline, then he goes to get a new racket instead of getting it when he's been at his chair to make the serve away a little bit. It's just little things like that. He does do a bit of gamesmanship. I don't think he crosses the line too much for me. I think that's probably something he's told to do by his coaches, really. And maybe it's the same with the bathroom breaks. But he has done it at times after he's won sets as well. I don't think he just does it to disrupt his opponent after he's lost a set. And he's a guy who maybe he just takes his time. He's a bit slower. Yeah, I think Murray was understandably annoyed in a way. I think he was more annoyed that he lost the match and he kind of let it get to him more than the issue of him actually doing it itself. I think he kind of said afterwards he knew it was coming. He just couldn't quite deal with it. So I think he was probably more annoyed at himself that he couldn't handle it in the way he'd hoped to and prepared for. But I just think the pile on Tsitsipas maybe from some other players in the media was a little bit harsh for me personally, because he isn't the only player who does it, and I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think I think it did get to him a bit in the end, probably in the Alcaraz match where the crowd were on his back, where he took a bathroom break, and he did take a much shorter one in that match of about 3 minutes after he'd taken another long one in the match against Manarino. So I thought maybe it was just a little bit unfair on Tsitsipas. And then when you have someone like Zverev coming out kind of, having to go to him to kind of probably take the attention off him, where obviously we know we've talked about it before the tournament with the off-court issues and question marks of Zverev. I think he kind of took the opportunity there to put that on Tsitsipas and questioned his character, which I thought was a bit unfair. Tsitsipas hit back by, I mean, clearly those two don't get on. I think Tsitsipas confined says it shows the level of the guy Zverev is for accusing him of actually receiving coaching during the total break he took against Zverev in Cincinnati. So I think first of all, it'll be interesting to see those two if they actually play the Laver Cup in a couple of weeks on the same team. But you've got Medvedev there as well, who doesn't get on with Tsitsipas. So yeah, I thought it was a bit harsh from Zverev, especially when I thought he used a bit of gamesmanship against Lloyd Harris in the quarterfinals. I don't know if you saw where he was complaining about the screen. He did it on set point with Harris serving. He then had to wait over a minute. Harris missed the first serve and then lost the next 3 points. So I thought, Zverev's not really in a position to be questioning Tsitsipas about that, but something does need to be done.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what you said there. I think one thing, and as much as I love Andy Murray, I can stand up and say when he's done something wrong. I thought he crossed the line when he used the cheat word. I don't think Tsitsipas did anything that was technically cheating. I saw why in Cincinnati Zverev raised the issue that he could be communicating with his coach because he took his whole bag off court. He may have seen Apostolos in the crowd on his phone and thought that was the logical solution. I can see why he was suspicious of that. But I think Tsitsipas did take note of that and he wanted to make it clear he wasn't cheating. And he hasn't been taking his whole bag off court with him. He's just been taking his kit, what he thought he needed. So I do think it's gamesmanship. I do think it's exploiting a gap in the rules to kind of maybe shift the momentum a bit, kind of maybe make your opponent a bit cold, frustrate them. I don't know. But like you say, there's so many things in tennis where kind of little things can be exploited where it's unclear in the rules, and we do see players use them. And it's not really cheating until the rule specifically outlaws it. I think if we could keep bathroom breaks short of that, it'd just be great. From making sure the guy at the other side of the net isn't getting cold. It's important that you keep your body moving when you're in these kind of matches, that you're not taking breaks for too long. So yeah, I do think things need changing. I thought Murray crossed the line calling Tsitsipas a cheat, and I do think the pile-on was a little bit too much. I think Tsitsipas mentioned that he might take a little bit of a break as well. So I mean, he's a top player. He's such a talented player who the tour's much stronger with. So we hope that that's not too long, that we see him back on court quite soon. But I think that's my final thoughts on the US Open. I don't know if there's anything else you want to pick up on, Ewan.
Yeah, I guess the last point would just be the impact Medvedev winning could have whether it's going to have an impact on the other young guys who haven't won a slam yet, or whether it's just going to be for himself. And I guess it's hard to tell that until we get to the Australian Open, whether it's kind of going to open the door for Zverev, Tsitsipas, and anyone else, or whether it's just a big Stefan Medvedev himself that he's made that breakthrough. So it'll be interesting to see that, and also interesting to see what impact it could have on the Grand Slam race now. But I would still expect to see Djokovic winning more slams, but maybe not as many more as it could have done if he'd continued the streak.
Yeah, I mean, Djokovic clearly isn't done. There's no way that that's even crossing anyone's mind that Djokovic is done. And Nadal's probably going to win more slams as well. Hopefully his surgery has kind of mitigated the issue that he's been experiencing in his foot for quite a while now, and that he gets back to his best tennis playing as comfortably as he can. Because you know what, I think as much as I do want to see the next gen emerge, I think didn't Tier 4 say that everyone in the locker room now feels that they can win? All the young lads feel that they're ready to step up and win, which is, it's great to hear that kind of talk. But I want them to do it by coming through, players that have been part of that big three. I want them to earn it, earn the changing of the guard by finally defeating Djokovic and Nadal in slam finals when we face them. So I think we're set up actually for a very interesting year of slams next year. Obviously, the year of slams is done this year, although there's a lot of tennis to still be played. The ATP finals is going to be an interesting one. The Laver Cup, obviously, a lot of fun. We've still got Indian Wells as well, haven't we? So we've still got things to come. But the year of slams is over. It ends with 2 new names on the trophies in the singles, which is just such fun to finally see. So yeah, I mean, what an excellent US Open it's been, and we can't wait to be back with you to discuss the upcoming tournaments. We're not certain yet. We think maybe the Laver Cup, but we're not sure. We're not sure on Indian Wells. We'll definitely do the ATP finals. There's no question about that, and the WTA finals as well, maybe. So we'll be back with you soon. We'll bring you an update when we are back. So thank you for listening, and goodbye for now.